Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Show, your source for market intelligence, forecasts, and strategies. Hello, I'm Michael Bull. Thanks for being with us today. And I'm partially laughing because we have a very fun show for you today. We're going to talk about social media for business. We're going to talk about some successful strategies for business users. We're going to talk about some mistakes to avoid. We're going to talk about some tips with some particular platforms. And I have an expert here with me in Studio One. I have Les Atkins here. He's CEO of Orange SMS. That's for social media strategies, right, Les?
Correct, yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
I've heard social media strategies in a long time. So
It's just Orange SMS.
Orange SMS.
So where does the orange come in?
The orange, if you go to my new website, it actually is unique. So the whole point of being a unique organization is we can create a unique strategy. There's nothing that rhymes with orange, so we can create a unique strategy. My mother came up with that analogy.
Nice. That's nice. So is your mother on social media?
She actually is because of her grandkids. Facebook, barely.
Okay.
But she's 80-something, so.
Well, Les, for businesses and for business users, how prolific is social media and how important is it today?
Well, I found some statistics, and as of July 2015, the worldwide population is 7.3 billion. Now, let's put that in perspective. Of that, 2.3 billion are active social media users. And then 91% of retail brands use 2 or more social media channels, and the internet users have an average of 5.5 social media accounts. And social media users have risen by 176 million just in the last year.
Wow.
So that if you think about it, 1 million new active mobile social users are added every day. That's 12 each second.
Wow. Wow.
So social is a vital part of any business community and organization.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I started in social media many, many years ago, and my fellow commercial real estate brokers actually laughed at me. They just laughed out loud. What are you thinking, Michael? But today it is really important. And I look at the amount of contacts and followers and business that we've picked up, and it's been pretty amazing.
Actually, it's funny. I was at one of the commercial real estate meetings, and a couple of the guys were like, "This is crazy, right? Why are we doing this?" And I said, "Well, you got about 5 years." He goes, "Okay, I'm gonna retire after 5 years, so I don't need to be on social media."
That's right. That's right. Well, how can a business social media user decide how to get started? What's important? What should they really think about to do the right things?
So the first time, years ago, and when we talk years in social media, 2. But the point being is that it was about setting up your social media and getting out there, and it didn't matter what you did, but you had to get out there. Well, now it's kind of changed. You really need to understand what your objective and your goal is and who your audience is. Because my audience for my company is different from your audience from your company. And they're not going to be equal. So if I look at you and say, okay, you're very successful, you're doing Facebook and Twitter and let's just say those 2. Well, my audience might be more apt to, I'll reach them further in Instagram, and I'll reach them further by using Pinterest and other social media things, and maybe YouTube. Maybe my audience is more video.
So how do I, as a business person, figure out where my customers are?
So you start out by understanding who your customers are.
Okay.
Which is, interestingly enough, I still talk to companies that don't really know who their customers are.
Right.
But you find out who they're...
The ones to pay the bills.
Yes, exactly. They buy stuff. And you ask people to say, well, what do I want? I want to buy more stuff. It's like, okay, that's great, but you got to reach them first.
Yeah.
And so the biggest thing, I think, is to understand who your main buyer is. Create a profile of who that main buyer is and the age around that main buyer. Are they 40 and over, or are they 40 and under? And based on just that one aspect, you will change your digital strategy based on knowing if they're 40 and under or 40 and over. Now, you can have 2 strategies, but you can't have it at the same time. Meaning that you have to spend a quarter on one, a quarter on the next one, a quarter on one. So you can do that, but the first thing you got to do is really understand who that person is who buys your stuff, and who actually is an evangelist of your stuff, and you want to create influencers of your stuff. I mean, look at Coca-Cola. You know, the people that drink Coke are very avid Coke drinkers. They're like, I don't want Pepsi. But vice versa, people who drink Pepsi are the same way. So you want that type of audience.
Well, it's interesting. So you got to know who your audience is, and then trying to figure out where they are. So give us some examples. So if I'm building a new office tower in Chicago, right, and I'm trying to reach business owners and the lawyers and accounting firms, let's say in Chicago, how do I know what platforms where they'll be?
So pretty much you can guarantee that particular audience is going to be on LinkedIn. Yeah. Probably if they're 40 and under, they're going to be on Twitter. And then I would sprinkle some videos in as well that post on like a LinkedIn or a Twitter, and then send them to your YouTube channel that has a lot more information and video inside of that building.
Okay. Well, let's say I'm building a new apartment complex in D.C., and I'm expecting that it's urban infill, so I want some millennials, and maybe I even want some of the baby boomers that are getting more into urban apartment living.
So you're going to look more for Instagram and Twitter again. Twitter's kind of like one of those catch-alls. Yeah. And everybody thinks Facebook's one of those catch-alls. Facebook is just big.
Yeah.
So if you really look at your audience, yeah, you may hit them. It's like what I tell people is if you put things on Facebook, it's like a shotgun effect. You'll probably hit your audience, but you want to focus because you want to spend money on a very strong digital strategy. That's kind of a new, people are like, well, I can do social media for free. Well, you can, but you can't do it well.
Right.
You know. So, but I think like in that example, it'd be Instagram, again, YouTube, and then Twitter.
Right. Well, you've hit on a lot of things here that I'm curious about, and I know my listeners and viewers are curious about. And one of the things you talked about is, spending time and it being free. Well, time is money, right? So you really got to think about how much time you're spending on what social media platforms, what your content is, and who your audience is, and then how are you doing that? Are you using some systems? Would you suggest that most businesses use some platform that gives them more efficiency in their social media work?
I would. I mean, interestingly enough, social networks earned an estimated $8.3 billion from advertising in 2015. And so 38% of organizations plan to spend more than 20% of their total advertising budgets on social media. So I think the business side is changing from a perspective of spending money on things you're not good at. I mean, if you think about it from a perspective of looking at just business in general, a lot of businesses are now contracting things like training and like maybe
commercial real estate services.
Commercial real estate services, yeah, commercial real estate services, yeah. And even commercial real estate services are contracting like furniture companies and things of that nature. So we're already in a model of we already pay for things that we don't do well. It's just like social media is interesting because even though it's growing, you still come across those companies like, well, my kid can do it. Well, yeah, your kid can do it, but will they do it? Will they do it well? Will they create a digital strategy? Will they reach your audience? Will they reach engagement? And will they cause your audience to be influenced by what you do?
And part of that decision tree, I guess, is really understanding how important it is to your business, right? And so if you don't think it's that important, maybe you are having your intern do it, and maybe it's not really getting the power that it needs, right? So right. How do you decide to go in-house or out-house, if you will?
So the rule of thumb used to be it was up to you and the amount of money you had. Now the rule of thumb is you've got to have both, meaning that you've got to have a professional come in, and I sound like I'm pitching, but I'm really not. It's not going to work. I mean, think about it this way. If you were going to, say you drive a Jaguar, if you were going to get that Jaguar fixed, you wouldn't take it to Joe Schmo's mechanic, and he has an old Ford outside, right? So the point being is that you've got, in today's world, it's getting really interesting because everybody's on social media. So how do you break through the noise? Well, the way you do that is you've got to be different than the people that you're competing with, and if they all have interns, then you need to actually go out and get a better digital strategy.
Right, and that's interesting because I think if I'd ask you that 3 years ago,
Oh, yeah.
it may have been a little different. You can
was
handle a lot of
different.
stuff in-house, but it's become so much more important now.
It is, and you can still. I still recommend having someone in house that's overseeing it all. But when it comes to the digital strategy and creating a strategy and building influence, that's when I recommend you go find someone who's doing that.
Okay, and there's a lot more important things for us to cover, like content and attracting that audience. So stay with us. I'm Michael Bull. This is the Commercial Real Estate Show. We'll be right back. The commercial. Com.